Hello, fellow artists. Well, I'm working in watercolour and I'm tackling a rainforest with a lovely young lady in it. So now, if that doesn't scare you, what scares me? Now, I think any watercolour is a little bit frightening because you have no idea what's going to happen. A lot of the times, the water does most of the work, and so it should. So you really don't know how it's going to turn out. And that's exciting and scary. But that's why we have things like pastel on hand, so that if it doesn't work, we can always do a little opaque touch up over the transparent watercolour. Now that's why it's a good idea for watercolourists to learn a few different mediums, and then they never have to waste a piece of paper. They can turn it into a mixed medium. I'm putting in a lemon yellow wash first of all, and then because this is a rainforest and very bright greens in it, I'm using Viridian Green, and I'm going to be trying to create the feeling of tree ferns and also some of the dense foliage from the tall trees all around. Through the center of this will be a creek, and standing off onto the side where the paints are, I have the young girl. I'm having fun, and that's the only way to work. Just relax. Just relax. I'm sort of cutting in around her dress and her legs there. Not easy to see. I do have a very light tracing of a sketch there. There's a bit of a guide to me before I started. Now, this isn't an expensive sheet of paper. To tackle a subject like this, I would have much preferred to have got out my 650 gram Fabriano Artistico paper, but I am trying to get through my stockpile of the watercolour paper that my students had mainly used. I mean, I have it on hand, so it's a good one to use because I'm teaching, and you may not be using such an expensive sheet of paper as I'd like to. So I'm working on the less expensive papers to do these demonstrations. So this is just a Bockingford, probably about a 250 gram sheet of paper. As I said, you can see the little bit of buckling in the paper. I haven't taped it down or anything. It's still, fine. I can flatten it out if it buckles up a little bit. Now, because I don't want the green to be too bright green where it's very dark, I've dropped little bits of red into it. Red being the opposite to green, of course, it will grey it out. So at the moment, we've used lemon yellow, we've used Viridian Green, I've used ultramarine blue, which is a blue violet. The green is a blue green. So we're tending towards the blue tones in both the greens there, and the red is going in more as a shading colour, not as a bright colour. It'll be muted down and be used to basically represent the shadows in the green. So the predominant colour will be perhaps a yellow-green in the highlights and a bright green in the mid-tones through to a very dark greyed back green, which is where you might get the blue violets and the red into the subtlety of the green in the shadows. But green is going to be our dominant colour. But we'll need to have a few other colours there representing shadings and highlights. Now, I don't want anything to be too tight. As I said, I'm trying to capture the feeling of the fernery and the foliage, but there will be a figure in this, and the figure is going to be the dominant feature. So we want to show up close foliage and distance foliage, middle distance foliage, but we don't want any of this to be too tight. We're hoping that it'll soften off. Still cutting in around the figure there. Don't want to define it too tightly. I like to get a few tree trunks. Now, the better the quality of paper, the more sizing it has, and the more easy it will be to wipe out and create a tree trunk in this. If you're using a very cheap piece of paper, you can't do that. You can't cut in like that and wipe out. Actually, I'm surprised that the Bockingford will allow me to do this. It's obviously I've got in quick enough, and also my paint's probably on light enough that can do it. Now I've got to watch this. This is fairly tight at the moment. I don't want it to be as tight as this when it's finished. I need it to be more out of focus, so we're just going to keep an eye on this, that it doesn't stay tight. We need it to, we're working onto slightly wet paper, but the paper is drying out, so if it doesn't bleed away enough and the edges don't soften enough, I'm going to have to work to cut that back and soften that some more. Because if we ended up with a really tight tree fern in there, it would just look stylized and amateurish. As I said, our young lady is going to be the focal point. The foliage is really accent around her. So we've just got to watch that by going back in with a bit of highlight there, it's allowing me to touch the hard edges of that strong viridian green and allow it to bleed out a little bit and soften those edges. It's got to be a balance between hard edges and soft edges. You've got to watch, as I said, that you don't paint too tight, too fast. You can always go back and add areas and tighten up at the end. Work as loose as you can for as long as you can. As I said, a little bit scary. Painting with watercolours, a little bit scary taking on a complex subject. But this is the thing, you've just got to throw yourself in and have fun. Have fun. Don't stress, don't worry. It's the only way to achieve it. And think of the excitement if it works. And of course it will never work as you'd planned it, because a lot of the situations the water is doing it. So the water's going to surprise you. Let the water surprise you. I am enjoying this. Now, if you have any questions, get into the comments. If you're getting this in an area where there is a comment section, get into the comments and feel welcome to ask your questions. Now, I can't give personalised one-on-one tuition for the cost of, say, a Patreon tier, but I can take your questions into consideration and answer them in the next lot of videos that I produce and put out. So while I'm not offering to do private tutorials for a group tuition situation, I'll certainly try to get through and answer everybody's questions. You're also welcome to suggest subjects that you'd like to see me demonstrate. Now you can see how I'm getting in and still trying to soften the hardness of this fern and also creating more light and shade into it. A little bit of the ultramarine blue, a little bit of the cadmium red. We're not wanting it. At this point I do come in and I get a little bit strong in the red, and I think I tone this back again. So we're just producing that pattern of light and shade in that foliage. There'll be a lot of shadow in this. Being a rainforest, we have to get into quite a bit of shading. And also, of course, that's going to make our water in the creek sparkle more, and also the light on the young lady. It'll make those features stand out more if I can get quite a lot of shading into this work. I'm working with a pure sable brush. Before, when I was working with a large brush, it was a Pettigrew Pearl, which is a high quality squirrel mop brush. Very beautiful brushes to work with. And this here is a pure sable. It's a Da Vinci. Now, I do love working with the good quality natural hairs. I started learning watercolours under a master teacher when I was 11. I'd actually been working with them since I was about 7. I started taking adult lessons with a master artist from about 11, and that's when I got some very high quality sable brushes. I'm quite pleased with how this is working at this early stage. I imagine this painting will take me at least 3 hours or more, if not a quarter sheet of paper. It's a good size to tackle for a class demonstration, but this subject is also relatively complex to do in one class situation. Sometimes a subject like this that included a figure might have taken 2 classes to get through. So I'll be bringing you this lesson across a series of videos. So see you next time.